You don't make silly mistakes because you don't know the answer. That's a common misconception. The truth is far more nuanced and, frankly, more empowering. You make them because something fundamental changes within your cognitive processes when you're under pressure. It's not about a lack of knowledge, a gap in your understanding, or a failure to learn. Instead, it's a profound, often unnoticed shift in how you access, process, and apply that knowledge when the stakes are high. This distinction is crucial for truly understanding and overcoming these frustrating errors. Think about it. You study diligently, sometimes for hours on end, meticulously absorbing every detail. You understand the material deeply, so much so that you could probably explain complex concepts to a novice. You've seen the exact question, or a very similar one, countless times during practice sessions, quizzes, or mock exams. But then, in the high-stakes environment of an exam, a presentation, or a critical decision-making moment, you get it wrong. A simple error, a misread word, a forgotten step, a calculation oversight that seems glaringly obvious in retrospect. And when you check your work later, in the calm, quiet aftermath, away from the pressure cooker, you realize with a sharp pang of frustration, a sinking feeling in your stomach. I knew this. I absolutely knew this answer. How could I have missed something so basic? That's what makes it worse, isn't it? The sting isn't from ignorance, from genuinely not knowing the material. It's from the undeniable, infuriating fact that you possessed the knowledge, the capability, the understanding. But something, some invisible force, prevented you from demonstrating it when it mattered most, leading to a result that doesn't reflect your true ability. This pervasive phenomenon happens because mistakes are not solely about a deficit in knowledge. While knowledge is foundational, it's only one piece of the puzzle. They are profoundly about how your brain behaves, how it adapts, and how it reacts under pressure. Our brains are incredibly dynamic, constantly adjusting to environmental cues. When you're studying, practicing, or reviewing material, you're typically in a calm, controlled, and low-stress environment. Your physiological state is relaxed, your cognitive resources are fully available. You think clearly, methodically, allowing for deep, deliberate processing. Your prefrontal cortex, responsible for executive functions like planning and decision-making, is operating optimally. You take your time, allowing your brain to engage in deep processing, forming robust neural connections. But in an exam, a job interview, a sports competition, or any high-pressure situation, everything changes dramatically. The environment shifts, and so does your internal state. There's the relentless ticking of the clock, creating intense time pressure that feels like a physical weight. There's the physiological and psychological burden of stress, releasing cortisol and adrenaline, which can narrow your focus and impair working memory. And there's the immense weight of expectation, from yourself, from your family, from your peers, from your future. Your brain, a marvel of adaptation, reacts to these new, demanding conditions by shifting its operational mode, often without your conscious awareness. This phenomenon is beautifully encapsulated by Nobel laureate psychologist Daniel Kahneman, a pioneer in behavioral economics, who explains, "Nothing in life is as important as you think it is while you are thinking about it." This profound quote highlights how our perception and cognitive resources become hyper-focused and often distorted under intense mental engagement, especially when stakes are high. When we're deeply immersed in a task under pressure, our subjective experience of its importance can overshadow objective reality, leading to cognitive biases and errors in judgment. It speaks to the tunnel vision that stress can induce, making us lose perspective and sometimes, ironically, perform worse. Under this heightened pressure, your brain undergoes a significant cognitive shift, moving away from its default, deliberate mode. It transitions from what Kahneman, along with Amos Tversky, famously termed System 2 or slow thinking, which is deliberate, analytical, effortful, logical, and requires conscious attention, to System 1, or fast thinking, which is intuitive, automatic, emotional, heuristic-driven, and operates with little to no conscious effort. Fast thinking is incredibly quick, almost instantaneous. It's automatic, almost reflexive, firing off responses based on patterns and associations. It's efficient, designed by evolution to conserve mental energy and react swiftly to perceived threats or opportunities. But crucially, it's also far more prone to errors and biases because it prioritizes speed and familiarity over thoroughness and accuracy. In this mode, you might find yourself reading questions too quickly, skimming over crucial details, missing negatives or qualifiers. You assume, filling in gaps with what you expect to see rather than what's actually there, relying on incomplete information. You skip steps in a logical sequence, trusting your gut over a systematic, step-by-step approach that you know is correct. You stop checking your work rigorously, convinced you've got it right because the initial recognition felt strong. This isn't because you're suddenly careless, less intelligent, or fundamentally flawed, but because your brain is desperately trying to keep up with the overwhelming demands of the situation, prioritizing speed and survival over meticulous accuracy. It's a survival mechanism misfiring in an academic or professional context. At Daily Reset Lab, this channel is dedicated to breaking down these hidden psychological patterns behind how you study, think, and perform under pressure. We aim to demystify the inner workings of your mind so you can harness its power more effectively. If this experience feels familiar, if you've nodded along to any of these points, recognizing yourself in these descriptions, then you'll definitely want to understand this next. We highly recommend watching our related video, Why Students Panic Before Exams. It delves deeper into the physiological and psychological cascade that leads to exam anxiety and how to manage it. Now, let's go even deeper into another critical factor that contributes to these silly mistakes. Beyond the shift to fast thinking, there's something else insidious happening too. A subtle trap that catches many of us off guard. It's a pervasive cognitive bias known as overconfidence, particularly the illusion of knowing. When a question, a problem, or a task looks familiar, when it triggers a strong sense of recognition, a feeling of, "I've seen this before," your brain tends to relax too early, prematurely signaling that the challenge is overcome, that the hard work is already done. It assumes, often incorrectly, based on superficial cues, "I know this. I've got this completely handled. No need to exert further mental effort." So instead of engaging in deep, critical thinking, you disengage, allowing your mind to coast. You stop thinking deeply, failing to probe for nuances, subtle distinctions, or potential pitfalls that might differentiate this instance from previous ones. You stop checking carefully, bypassing the crucial verification steps that are designed to prevent errors and ensure accuracy. And that precisely is when those silly mistakes creep in, often unnoticed until it's too late, after the submission or the decision has been made. It's the gap between perceived familiarity and actual mastery that creates the vulnerability. So the true solution isn't simply trying to be more careful. That's often an ineffective, vague command to your brain under pressure. It doesn't provide actionable guidance. It's about fundamentally changing how you approach familiar questions and tasks, cultivating a new mental habit. Instead of the automatic, often detrimental thought that springs from overconfidence, "I know this," you need to consciously train yourself to adopt a new internal mantra, a deliberate cognitive override. "Let me check this. Let me verify this thoroughly," as if I'm seeing it for the very first time. Because genuine accuracy doesn't come from raw speed or initial recognition, which are products of fast thinking. It comes from sustained, deliberate attention, a commitment to methodical processing, and a rigorous commitment to verification, even when things seem deceptively easy. It's about building a new, more resilient mental habit. Here's a practical, actionable strategy you can implement immediately to counteract these cognitive traps. Slow down precisely at the moment that feels easiest, the point where your brain wants to rush ahead, where familiarity breeds complacency. This is your critical intervention point. Pause. Take a deliberate breath, grounding yourself in the present moment. Reread the question or instructions, not just scanning, but actively looking for keywords, subtle details, or qualifiers you might have missed. Check the details of your answer, your calculations, your reasoning, your chosen options. Ask yourself, does this logically follow? Have I addressed all parts of the prompt? Because the easier something feels, the more familiar it appears, the more your brain signals all clear. The more likely you are to rush it, to skip steps, and consequently, the more susceptible you become to making a silly mistake. This counterintuitive approach is your shield against overconfidence. So, the next time you make what feels like a silly mistake, that frustrating error that makes you question your own competence, don't immediately label yourself as careless, unintelligent, or incompetent. That's a harmful and inaccurate self-assessment. That only perpetuates a negative cycle. Instead, understand what actually happened on a cognitive level. Reframe the experience. Your brain, in its attempt to cope with pressure and familiarity, switched modes, from deliberate System 2 to automatic System 1. And you, understandably, didn't notice it happening in the moment because these shifts are often subconscious. This understanding is the first, most crucial step to regaining control, to forgiving yourself, and to developing strategies that work with your brain, not against it. It's about recognizing a universal cognitive pattern, not a personal failing. Subscribe to Daily Reset Lab for more insightful perspectives like this, helping you master your mind and performance and unlock your full potential. And if you want to dive deeper into understanding the profound impact pressure has on your thinking and learn practical techniques to manage it, make sure to watch our in-depth analysis, Why Students Panic Before Exams. It's the perfect companion to this discussion, offering further strategies for high-stakes situations.